Welcome to the 2022 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. I'm Ruth Behar, an educator and an author of 2 middle grade novels and a picture book. I'm honored and thrilled to be here today as the moderator for our panel on redefining the writing workshop, freeing students to write about their identity, with NCTE luminaries Alfredo Celedón Luján and Tracey Flores. So please read our anti-harassment policy, which you'll see in the chat box. And don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's YouTube channel. And if you are a school, a classroom, a librarian, an educator joining us, please enter our classroom book set giveaway. You can find the link to the entry form in the chat. We can also send you a professional development certificate via email. So let me now introduce our two amazing panelists. Alfredo Celedón Luján is from Nambé, New Mexico. This is his 50th year as an educator. He has been a writer in residence at the Noepe Center for Literary Arts at Martha's Vineyard, and also with the Multicultural Artists in the Schools program in Alaska. He is past president of NCTE. Alfredo is currently a middle-level teacher-writer at Monte del Sol Charter School. Welcome, Alfredo. And now let me introduce Dr. Tracey T. Flores, who is an assistant professor of language and literacy at the University of Texas at Austin. Tracey is the founder of Somos Escritoras, We Are Writers, a creative space for Latina girls grades 6 through 12 that invites them to share and perform stories from their lived experience using art and writing as a tool for reflection, examination, and critique of their worlds. So I'm going to ask Alfredo to begin with the first invitation to write. Alfredo, please take it away.
I needed to unmute. I'm still learning this mute and unmute business. Hello and welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to participate in the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival, especially during Latinx Heritage Month, Unidos, Inclusivity for a Stronger Nation. And here I only want to add that I prefer affirmation to inclusion. I believe that affirmation of student voices and identities is the new writers' workshop. From my old school perspective, redefining the writing workshop is turning a negative to a positive, and in NCTE lingo, turning the page. In the old day, the red marks we received on our papers were minus this and minus that, -1 for a misplaced comma or capital letter, -2 for a run-on or fragment, -1 for a dangling modifier, all minuses from 100, as if there were 100 mistake points you could get deducted. In short, getting a good grade for writing was about making the fewest mistakes possible. Today, the writing workshop is more about affirming a student's voice and authenticity through positive marginal notes or open praise in the classroom, that is to say, affirmation of the student's identity. Of course, we still give feedback on grammar, mechanics, syntax, but it isn't splashed in red minus marks all over the paper. Now, the writing workshop includes poetic license, the freedom to break rules, so long as the writer knows the rules, as in inaugural New Mexico Poet Laureate Levi Romero's poem, High School English. So now we might want to take a moment to write a bit. And I'm inviting all of you who are in the session to get out your sheet of paper or your keyboard or whatever it is that you write on. And I'm going to give you a prompt similar to what we do in the classroom. One of the prompts that I use for identity in the classroom and student voice is Pat Mora's Two Worlds. So I'm going to read it here, and then we're going to have a moment to reflect. And then you can write a response, a poem response, a piece of prose, a short paragraph, one word, one sentence, one line, etc. And when you come up with a line or a word that you would like to include in the chat, please pop it in. So now I'm going to read the poem, and then we can reflect and do a little bit of writing. Two Worlds by Pat Mora. Bilingual, bicultural, able to slip from how's life to me están volviendo loca, able to sit in a paneled office, drafting memos in smooth English, able to order in fluent Spanish at a Mexican restaurant, American but hyphenated, viewed by Anglos as perhaps exotic, perhaps inferior, definitely different, viewed by Mexicans as alien. Their eyes say, you might speak Spanish, but you're not like me. An American to Mexicans, a Mexican to Americans, a handy token sliding back and forth between the fringes of both worlds by smiling, by making the discomfort of being prejudged bilaterally. In my class, I often ask my students to think of their two worlds. Not all my students are bilingual or well, they're all bicultural, but not all of them are bilingual. But they exist in two worlds. And so I asked them to try to narrow down the two worlds in which they live and then write about them. And you'll see some of those, or you'll hear some of those student pieces later in the program. But for now, why don't we take a couple of minutes to do a little bit of writing ourselves. Okay, if you've written something, if a line jumps out that you'd like to put into the chat, please do so, or a couple of lines, please do so.
I love the way that you introduced that to us, Alfredo. Can I share a line out loud?
Absolutely.
So I thought about my many different identities and spaces that I navigate, and I wrote Chicana, educadora, scholar, writer, mother. Navigando mi mundo, wearing many hats, speaking many languages directly from my heart. And that's all I got for right now. But it spoke to me really deeply in this specific moment. Thank you for that invitation.
Well, great. And to everybody in the audience, this, as I tell my students, is only a start. So whatever we've written today can be continued tomorrow or next year, or whenever the mood moves us to write. So this is only a start to something perhaps longer. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's also an end. It can be an end as well. Anybody else want to share? Did anything come into the chat?
Trying to see. I don't think so that I can see, but let's see. Not seeing at the moment. Okay. Nothing in the chat at the moment, so maybe people are gearing up. Okay. But I also wrote something.
Please share.
Because I love the idea of the two worlds, and moving back and forth, sliding back and forth. And I just quickly wrote Cubana y Nueva Yorkina, and also Michigania, meaning Michigan, and Miamian, and thinking of you, Alfredo. And when I go to New Mexico, I also find my ancestors, as I do in Toledo, where the ghosts slip and slide on the cobblestone streets and try not to get lost.
Nice.
So that was inspired by your reading.
Well, when you come to New Mexico, you're going to have to look us up.
I will.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Cool.
Love to. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, to those in the audience, you can pop your line in anytime during the show. It doesn't have to be at this moment or not. It's your choice. But now we can move on to the next segment, Ruth, if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Alfredo. That was so interesting. Maybe we want to move on to some conversation now. Both of you, Alfredo and Tracey, would you like to discuss your roles as writers and as teachers of writing? That would be really wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really excited when this presentation was dreamed up, this conversation was dreamed up, and to be in conversation with both of you, to people that I really deeply admire and whose writing and work really inspires me in so many ways. And so I come to this work as a storyteller and a writer, and with a deep-seated belief in all of my heart that everyone has a story, everyone has an important story to tell, and everyone's voices are powerful. And so when I think about writing and teaching young writers and teaching writers, I think about who they are, where they come from, and what matters to them, and how do we create those spaces in our classrooms that allow that to flourish, that allow the semillas in our classroom to grow and to step into their power as writers, and to see what writing can be for them. And I also think about writing as a way to break silence and as a way to unearth stories that have been silenced or hidden, or those that we have been made to feel ashamed of. And I think a lot about the writers who've come before us and the writers who paved the way. And it wasn't until I was older that I started reading a lot of writers from my community. And I think about this legacy that they've laid for us. And I want to make sure that our young people understand that we are writers, and we come from this rich legacy of storytellers, of poets, of artists, of activists who've used their writing as a way to break silence, speak their truth, to raise the consciousness of the lived conditions of our communities, of our gente, and the ways that we are part of this legacy. And we are part of these traditions. We are born storytellers. We are born writers. And so for me, I think about historicizing writing, historicizing the writer, and also helping students to know that writing is beyond our classroom. Writing is the world, and their writing should, break the walls of the classroom and go out and spill out into their lives. And I just think about writing and how much power comes with sharing your story and, making it public.
Mm-hmm. I love everything you said. I really like the idea of historicizing our writing and showing kids that there is a genealogy, right? That there are other writers before us and there's storytellers who may have been oral storytellers. Maybe they didn't get to write the stories down, but they passed them on in stories, in songs, maybe, in poetry, so many different ways to pass on these legacies. And so that we have those histories, and part of our responsibility as educators is to let kids know, let students know that those histories are there. And then, as you said, but also empower them to find their own voices as storytellers.
And at our own kitchen tables, at our own homes, we
Love that.
have this tradition of stories and storytelling for many purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. It's beautiful. Alfredo, do you want to share your thoughts
Well,
on this?
I will pick up where Tracey left off around the kitchen table. I
Yeah.
mean, our storytelling when I was a little kid was at my grandparents' house, and everybody would go there on Sunday nights, and have, of course, food at the table, and stories would be spun. There was no TV at the time, no internet, no iPhones. So we told stories, and some of those stories have turned into written stories. But when it comes to teaching writing in the classroom, I was fortunate to have had Ken McCrory, who was one of the gurus of free writing, and may he rest in peace. And he always emphasized writing with your students. If you're going to ask your students to write, they have to know that you yourself are grappling with words and ideas, and you are one of them. There's not a hierarchy in this. I also try to tell my students to think of themselves as writers rather than students. Perhaps students of life, but not students in the classroom. Good students will do their writing and turn it in as quickly as possible. And often, and I've had them confess to this, they have in the past turned in papers that they never read themselves. And teaching them, that to think as writers, not as a student who has to complete a task and turn it in, but rather as a writer who's thinking and who knows that words are malleable, and they can add them, delete them, change them, turn them inside out. So I want them to think of themselves as writers, not as task doers. So I try to practice that in the classroom. My belief is that everyone, as Tracey said, is a storyteller, and that if you can tell the story, you can write it. It just takes a little bit more effort.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I really like that. I would just underline that point that they are writers, not students, and not task doers. I think that is so important. And that the idea of writing as kind of an essential form of communication, and that we need to write often just for ourselves to make sense of our lives and our worlds, our stories, our communities. So that writing is something that we need to do. And it doesn't matter if you publish or not. I think sometimes people confuse writing with publishing, but writing is something essential, and for many of us, it's like breathing. Like if we don't put our ideas down, sometimes we don't know what our ideas are or what our feelings are. So I think, empowering students to really think of themselves as writers, and that writing is so essential, right, to thinking and to being and to existing, and to connecting with our communities and our stories and our histories. So I really love that way of thinking about it.
One of the my favorite parts of the day is when a student turns in a piece of writing, I open my email or I open my Canvas or whatever, and the student has turned in a piece of writing that was never assigned. So it's exactly what you're saying, that the student or the person is moved to write, not because it's a task, but because the story is presenting itself, and so it's great to receive writing that's not assigned.
Mm.
And I liked what you said about writing alongside your students and being part of that writing community. And if we're asking and inviting students to, write, that, sitting alongside them and writing is also really powerful. I write in front of my pre-service teachers, or I bring part of my writing and write a little bit more with them. I write in front of the second graders. I write in front of the mamas, because I want to be part of that community too. And I think it sends a powerful message too, that we're also writers and we're also working through the toughness of writing as well.
Let me ask a question. How do you help fellow young writers with the toughness of writing? How do you help them confront that challenge and find a way through it to the other side?
When I'm having my own struggles. I give us time every single day to write. And like what Alfredo said earlier about, this can be the beginning, this can be the ending. Like, we have these starts and stops, but let's get into this routine every single day where that we are writing and we're going to be working on different pieces. We'll find ways to come back to that piece and problem solve together, talk through parts, and sharing with the students myself that I talk a lot about my writing. I don't just sometimes I sit at my computer and cry, but I talk through parts with people. And that's what writers do, because you might be seeing it from one way, but then when you talk to someone else, they might be seeing something else, and that could help you get through it. And also just saying it out loud, you start to hear it differently too.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I think what's so interesting about writing is that on the one hand, it's very solitary. You have to sit there and write and concentrate and do it. But then it's also very community oriented, because you also need to share it. And like you said, like hear how it sounds when you read it aloud, get comments from other people, get feedback. So it's both a solitary activity and also a community activity. And you need both, I feel, to be able to write. So I think that's another interesting thing. And it seems like you're both creating these communities within your classrooms as well.
Absolutely.
And while I agree with all of what you're saying, I would also add that now I'm talking middle school, right? So I'm talking about being in a room of 20, 25 middle school students. So they're not usually going to be quiet. So even if you give a writing prompt, it's I always have to like stop somewhere in the middle of that writing session to say you cannot talk and write at the same time. So you're saying, Ruth, what you're saying is exactly true. It's both community oriented, but it's also solitary. And I think when students and us, when we start to put our words on the paper, it can't be your phone here and your computer here and your friend over there and throwing a pencil across the room. It's got to be like so getting middle school students to settle into like 3 minutes of silent writing is a challenge.
Yeah. Well, you were saying before that, back when you were younger and you'd be at your grandparents' house and there'd be food on the table and stories. It was this time before TV and before the internet and so on. And I wonder if you want to speak to what some of the challenges are today to storytelling and to writing in this age of the internet and digital realities. If you had any thoughts on that and how you confront that in the classroom. You were just giving us a really good example of that, Alfredo.
Go ahead, Tracey.
about all the social media and
Yeah, the social media and internet challenges, and maybe there's some good aspects about it as well.
so I've found it really as a way to expand what writing is and what storytelling is and what putting our ideas out there is. I bring in different like tweets when we're talking about language. There were some tweets where people are sharing their stories about, not feeling like they were Latino enough or Latinx enough because they didn't speak Spanish a certain way or they spoke a different variety. And, we were so horrible to each other sometimes about a lot about language. And so I bring these texts in to start the conversation, but also to show expansively what writing is and what writing can be. And also, in speaking about funds of knowledge, there's been some TikToks that I brought in where people are sharing some of their traditions, things that they've learned from people that they carry with them. And so I found it as a way to expand what storytelling is and can be and advocacy, and also as a way to inspire our writing and also to remind students that this is also important storytelling and writing. And this is a way that you're sharing your life and you're sharing, the things that are important to you, and pull that in different ways. So I have found it as a way to expand what we know about writing and storytelling, and also to connect to things that we're doing in the classroom or other types of creative writing.
That's amazing. What about you, Alfredo?
Well, first I want to thank Tracey a lot, Tracey, because you just made me feel like an old guy. Because first of all, everything in classes these days after the pandemic, after Zooms, is now like Canvas and everything is electronic, right? So students are submitting their papers electronically. I no longer walk home with a box full of papers that I have to spit out on my kitchen table and mark with a pen. Everything's coming in electronically. But I don't tweet, and I don't really know how to tweet, and I don't know how to access tweet or Instagram or TikToks. So somebody, probably my students, is going to have to teach me that media. But what I do want to say is one of the challenges, Ruth, I think is the perhaps, I don't know if to call it a genre yet, but it seems to be an emerging genre, and there's probably already research on it. But the texting, the texting, and and back in the day before you guys, when there were pagers,
I had a pager.
Did you? Yeah. and the teachers really had to like we still have our task, right? We have our what we have to present in the classroom, which is taking care of the standard American English, and making sure that students know the rules of writing and the, even spelling and using punctuation, etc. And so it's a challenge because students are not using, they have their own language. Their texting language is their own lingo. And so I'm exploring that as the new genre, and I'm wondering what kind of challenges it presents for the students who's in the classroom trying to teach how to punctuate between a dependent and an independent clause,
Exactly. Well, what's so neat about texting, and thinking of that as a new genre, which I think is so interesting, is that you can write a story in the form of letters, and texts are kind of like mini letters, very,
Right.
very brief little letters. So it could actually be a very inspiring form for young people to say, okay, go ahead and write a story that could be a series of texts between two friends, right? So that could be a genre right there that would be very, like, clear to them as a form, that as a very contemporary form that they can use. It's like a way of sneaking in actually a very old genre, which is the epistolary novel, right? The novel written in the form of letters. So you could kind of sneak that in via text. So I think there's a lot we could do that actually connects to kind of classical forms of writing, but is also very, very contemporary.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing a comment here. I know we'll have time for Q&A later, but maybe we could take a moment to answer this question, which looks really interesting, from Cristina Trujillo. I'd love to know what you both find to be the most exciting and the most surprising part of teaching writing. So Tracey, you want to go first?
I would say always the most exciting part of teaching writers is watching them step into their power as writers and finding their voices and in becoming empowered writers. I think it's beautiful, and sometimes it's a challenge and a struggle for some students, because they have different histories or relationships to writing from different experiences in their lives. And to watch young people kind of step into their power and find their voice and this fire for writing, it's really beautiful and it's really inspiring, and it gives me so much hope and fuels me in really powerful ways. And so being a part of that work alongside our young writers, and for them to see the many ways that their stories can not only heal them and heal themselves and also make sense of their worlds, but also how other people receive their stories.
Yeah.
That's the best part of my days.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That's beautiful. Yeah. What about you, Alfredo?
The most exciting part of teaching writing to me is, again, when students find their own voice. I mean, there are some passages from students that I had 35 years ago that I still remember because of something they had in their writing. So when their voice comes alive, for example, this week, as a matter of fact, we were writing about hands. We had a piece of writing. I'm going to forget the author right now, but we do have Nora Naranjo Morris, who has written about her father's hands, and several have written. And there was a student 35 years ago, his name was Raymond, who wrote about his father's hands and how hard and tough they were. But there was a moment where they were in the kitchen making empanaditas, and he talked about, he had the gesture of his father using his very hard hands in a very tender way, crimping the empanaditas at the end, So that image, and I have many of them, of a student writing a passage that remains permanent in my mind. That's very exciting for me. And the surprises, Christina, are, as I said, when a student sends me something that was not assigned to them. If I walk out in the courtyard and I see a student writing, everybody else is bustling around and the student is sitting there writing on their own. Or I go into the garden and a student is solitary in a little spot writing in their notebook. Those are the surprising and exciting things to me.
Wow, those are both so beautiful. Thank you both for such incredibly inspiring responses. Really, really beautiful. So now we're moving on to another part of our program. And Tracey, you're going to share some of your invitations to write.
Yes, absolutely. And so I thought about many different pieces to bring into our conversation and to invite you into your own storytelling during our conversation. And I always come back to the work of Carmen Lomas Garza and her picture books in my family, in family pictures. And she is an artist who grew up in Kingsville, Texas. And her art is shows images from her childhood with her community, with her family, the everyday moments to the traditional moments, the moments she doesn't want to forget. And in her images, they show such great detail. I'm going to stop for a minute. They show such detail. They show so much love. When you look at her art, you can see the joy and the love and just a family and community. And in the beginning of her book, she talks about growing up and, when she was growing up, she was, made to feel like she was inferior, her and her peers, and her art is a way to heal from that, as a way to reclaim these experiences in her life and to rewrite these narratives, and also to show the joy of her childhood, of her life. And I love to introduce her artwork to my students, to the mamas, to young students, to my pre-service teachers, because this is a powerful form of storytelling. And I always work with my pre-service teachers to first, let's draw this memory, let's draw this moment. And I always bring in her art. I also bring in Faith Ringgold's art as well. Also very detailed, also very joyful, so much joy. And I want my students to see this joy and to feel this joy and to remember in their own lives these moments of joy. And so today I really want to invite all of us to tap into the moments from our life with our friends, with our family, the people that we have made our family, with our teachers, because all of her art, she's not ever just by herself. There's always people around. She's always with others. And to sketch this out, what is this memory for you? And think about the details of this moment. Because in this picture, birthday barbecue, there's one large image. It's one, the birthday barbecue, but then there are so many stories within this larger moment of all these things that are happening. And I'm not bringing the text to this. I want us to think about sketching. I want us to think about the art. And so I invite you to take a few minutes to sketch. And I wish we could show them on the screen, but taking a few minutes to sketch. And then I will, if anyone wants to share like what came up for them in the chat, I encourage you to do that. But just think about your childhood, your adult years, these moments of joy with the people that you love, that you care about. And I know that was not a lot of time. And I wanted to share what I created about my memories from my life. And so here is an image of me and my Nana Josie. My Nana Josie is in the blue. She always wore a blue apron. My Nana Josie is my mom's mom, and I spent many, many days and weekends there. And when I always think about my childhood, I always go back to her house. I can smell tortillas. I can hear the conversations. It's so vivid to me. And so there she is in her blue apron, and there I am next to her in the purple. And we're sitting at our table, and every time I would go to her house, she'd make me fideo. in a big olla, and she had these 2 plastic blue bowls that she'd put them in for us. And then she'd always make them with flour tortillas, and on the table is her palote, because she'd always make them for us. And we'd put butter in them, and it was the stick of butter, not like the tub of butter, the stick of butter. And we'd, put it in there and just eat it. And it was the best. And we'd sit there and eat and talk and watch her story, which you can see on the TV, which is The Young and the Restless. And we would watch that every time I was there and just eat this fideo. And then we would go mimis and go upstairs and take a nap. And this is the memory that, comes to my mind a lot. It's just that time being with her and sharing a meal together, because she could spread whatever ingredients she had. She could make it spread for whoever showed up at the house. And we always had family coming in and out. And I think that that's really something that my mother, the gift she has, and also something that she's placed in me to be able to spread whatever we have, so everyone has a place at the table. So I wanted to share this to also be part of the community that we have here today.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. I loved it. Yeah, I found this very inspiring. I've always loved Carmen Lomas Garza's work of many, many, many years. And when you mentioned the joy, healing and joy, I thought those were so interesting together. Healing yourself through doing your work, but also finding the joy and remembering the joy of these times together with the family. And I was recalling, and I wrote a little note to myself, moments of joy in New York when we came from Cuba. Having, lived in a tropical country, my family was always looking for a beach, but we always had to wait till the summer when it was warm enough to go to the beach. And we'd go to Jones Beach, which was I don't know if it still is, probably is, very, very crowded beach. So it was kind of like being on the subway, but you were on the beach. and you were lucky to find a spot. And I was just remembering, like, all of us, on a big blanket in the sand, and my grandparents and my parents and my aunt and uncle and cousins and my brother, and just like all of us there, eating tuna fish sandwiches and platanito chips, on the sand. It was joyful. It was like, we loved it. It was like beautiful to just be on the beach together. Even a very crowded beach was beautiful for us. So it was remembering that really helped me to sort of imagine, like, all the people and how we were surrounded by other people as well, since it was crowded. So it's just, that was all coming to mind now. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
I can't wait to see it. I'd love to see that one day. That image of being at the beach, but it's like a subway because it's so packed. That is so vivid.
Yeah, I look back at it fondly now. I think probably when I was a child, I both loved it and didn't like having to park really far away and walk with all of our things to the beach. But then it was just the beauty of all being together, and just like enjoying that time together on the sand. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So thank you for that. Is there more you want to add, Tracey, to your reflection?
Yeah, I wanted to, so I always invite the students to look at the art, to talk about the art, to talk about what they notice and what comes to mind, and, make connections or think about their own lives. And we go to the art, and then we have conversations. We tell the stories. We story tell from the art, and then we read the vignettes, and then we take it to writing. And what we just did right now, though, it's making me think that we could visualize and tell the story and then go to the drawing. I've never done it that way, and we kind of started to do that right now.
Yeah,
and just see where that takes us, where the stories lead us.
That's wonderful. It's so beautiful. Thank you for that. So I think now we're going to have both of you share examples from your teaching. Alfredo, did you want to go first, and then we'll have Tracey share?
Sure. I first want to sort of set the context of giving a writing prompt as an example, and what I use for prompts. And then, if it's okay, we'll watch a video of my students reading their writing. One thing, I always, Pat Mora my classroom is named after Pat Mora because she visited our classroom and did a wonderful session with my students. So I always use my own true name as writing prompts, but also, of course, I use Sandra Cisneros, especially the my name vignette, and all she does to establish in her writing. We use it as a model for the ways in which we identify not only through our given name, but what the name means historically, and how it was given to us, and what it reveals about our own families. I also pair Corky Gonzalez's I Am Joaquin with section 16 of Whitman's Song of Myself. It's a good juxtaposition, I think. We have also had Israel Lopez, a visual artist, writer, and spoken word artist, as a cool guest in my classes. As you can imagine, as the teacher in my classroom, I'm sort of the guy who runs the class and the guy who students have to answer to, and the boring guy. So when you have a guy in green fatigues and a ponytail and looking cool as can be come into the class and start giving writing prompts and talking about writing, saying the same things you say every day, but in a very much more cool way, suddenly students are writing and responding and engaging and turning in some great stuff. Some of the writing that you're going to hear today from my students come from prompts that Israel Lopez gave. It's always nice to have a writer come into the classroom and share the writing and also give writing prompts. So I think we're ready for the video. Can it be shown now?
I'm Jimena. Who are you?
I'm Orsi, listening to corridos while showering, dancing to mariachis on in folklorico, yelling to the soccer players in the TV, waking up to music in the morning knowing you're going to clean, eating tacos in the little camioncitos, putting chili on every food we eat, waiting to hear music outside in the afternoon, knowing it's the paletero or the elotero, thinking how nice it would be if the Mexican national team won at least one soccer World Cup. Playing soccer with the ball with no air and racks as goals is my Mexican world. Drinking McDonald's coffee in the morning, going to Monte charter school, playing basketball, playing video games, listening to rap, playing the bass, celebrating Halloween, eating spaghetti, watching the Super Bowl, going to Disneyland and to the Universal Studios is my American world.
I am Jimena Parra. Who are you?
I'm Miles from Vermont. The snow was up to my knees outside at my home in Underhill, Vermont. Sometimes I would walk outside, away from the warmth of my home and family, and just lie there, letting the snow ever so slowly engulf my body. I would just stare up into the clouds from my place in the endless white powder snow and watch. Watch the snow falling on me, watch it falling on the trees, covering the mountains of my home, watching it swirling on in an endless cycle. This is my ultimate peace. This is what I wait for. Makes me sad to think some people will never feel this. Some people will never experience this ineffable quiet, this unparalleled love and deep respect for nature, the deep respect for it to quietly bury you alive.
Me llamo Camila y tú te llamas.
Yo me llamo Masi.
Are you from two worlds?
I live in two worlds, one where I speak fluent Spanish and have a different culture, and the other where I speak English. I can say the same thing in two languages, such as how are you and cómo estás. I go by Hispanic or Argentine American. I don't have a preference, but I'm happy to know them both. When I speak English, people can understand me with no difficulty. When I speak Spanish, people can understand me. When people hear that I'm from Argentina, they don't give too much thought about it and think of me as a normal person. I am Massimo Franco Dalvi. My name originates from Italy and means the greatest in Latin. I like my name because it's different from others which are more commonly used in the country. The history of my name does not originate from my family. In 2018, the name Masi was ranked 1,526 of the most common names in the United States. Also, out of 100,000 Americans, 0.49% of them are named Massimo. Some people call me Massimo but spell it with an O, which in my case goes with an A. Another reason that I don't like it is because I don't like how it sounds. That's why I go by Masi. In conclusion, my name originates from a great country and has a strong meaning. Many famous people share my name, such as Massimo Baratti. It is a good name and I am happy to have it.
My name is Miles. What's your name?
My name is Keshav Olubolu. My identity is kind of like who I am as a person in life. I am an Indian, but I was born in Ohio and my parents were born in India. So am I Indian or an American? For my identity, I consider myself an Indian. My ancestors were Indian, so it kept on passing down. My ancestors were never American. I am happy to be Indian and to have the blood of an Indian, but sometimes I feel like I have to act like an American. When I first started going to school, I didn't know how to speak English, so I spoke my native language. But the teachers never understood what I was saying, so they complained to my parents and then I started learning English. Now, because I'm speaking English a lot, I'm slowly forgetting my actual language. Those were one of the times I felt in my life where I felt like I had to act like an American. Another time where I felt like I had to be American was what food I eat. When I was younger, my people would always say that my food looked disgusting. My only comeback was not as disgusting as you. I celebrate different things in my heritage than in America. I celebrated Diwali, which is a festival of lights. I was confused when I first heard this, but it's just you celebrate about lights. It is actually pretty fun because we shoot fireworks into the sky and we eat food. And also, New Year is different as well than the one in America. Our New Year is called Ugadi, which is on April 13th, and it means the beginning of a new age. I'm kind of in the middle here. I live in America and go to school here, but I celebrate Indian heritage. So what am I? American or Indian? Well, I guess I'm neither. I am an AI.
I'm Alfredo Luján. Who are you?
I am Olive Gardini. Windy flight, sky below me, starry ocean above me. Although I can soar so high, I will never reach what wasn't meant to be reached. Its purpose only meant to tempt me, to fool me that I can reach the unreachable.
I'm Alondra. Who are you?
My name is Devani Lockwood, but in my language it is Sokwa Moepokuin, and I will read Powerful that I had wrote. So Tewa is happiness, happiness from hearing dances be sung, happiness like being able to speak fluently, having names be named after nature, weather, and animals, and to be put into a beautiful name by elders. Then the next one is freestyle. The hearing of the music and dances, hearing the language be spoken without hesitation, the smell of bomb food that's cooked on feast days, dances that are being spoken to our ancestors, the sound of the drums with the voices going boom, 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 and powerful names being made from elders that are being spoken from the front and back.
Well, I'm very proud of those students. I think perhaps the video could have been more professional, but I'm glad it wasn't, because these students went out. I was in my classroom teaching, and they were doing the video, they were doing the prompts, they were doing the introductions, they chose the spots where they were reading from. And so I think it was very authentic in that way. And I'm very proud of them. And I have to say, the last one, Devani, that boom, boom, boom. If you've ever been to Native American feasts, days, or dances, that drum, that boom, 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 and the way she pronounced it and the way she had it in the cadence blew me away, but they were all good writing, and clearly they all showed student identity and heritage. And that's what the new writing workshop is about, I think, in part anyway.
Absolutely. That was really wonderful. And I was just so touched and impressed by your students and just how much passion and love and urgency they put into their writing and their reading and their sharing. It was really, really beautiful to see. So nice to have the video and be able to get a sense of how the teaching has now been transmitted to these students who have done this writing and this performing as well of their work. So really beautiful. Alfredo, do you want to add anything else before we move to Tracey?
No, only that it takes a lot of trust too, right? I mean, like if you're in a classroom and you have 20 students, you're in charge of all those 20 students. And to be able to send 5 of them out to go do their own thing without supervision, takes a lot of trust. And I think those students demonstrated the ability of students being able to work independently without having to have a teacher monitor their every step.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, as was just said, amazing, and felicidades to your students and to you as well. And thank you for sharing with us. Let's move to Tracey. Love to have you share some examples from your teaching as well.
Alfredo, I really liked the students producing that themselves. I think that's an important part of the process too, how they decided to be inside or outside, and how they, who I am, Tracey, who are you? And just the different ways that they put it together. I think it's very, very powerful and something that I'd like to bring more into my work as well. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the work that I do in Somos Escritoras. As Ruth mentioned earlier in our introductions, I am the founder of Somos Escritoras. We are writers, and it's a creative space for Latina girls that invites them to write, share, and perform their stories using art, writing, and theater as tools of reflection, examination, and critique of their worlds. And the heart of Somos is our 2-week summer workshop, in which myself and a team of writing mentors, Latina pre-service teachers, Latina classroom teachers, and undergraduate students and doctoral students from the local university and Arizona State University more recently, because now we're remote. We've been remote. We organize and we design a 2-week workshop in which we bring in different texts, digital storytelling. We bring in art around that speaks to themes related to identity, culture, language, gender, and age. And we facilitate this space together. And we have this 2-week workshop in the summer, and then during the school year, we continue to have, 1-day workshops. We've had different authors. Guadalupe Garcia McCall's come to our workshops and done a workshop for the girls. Carmen Tafoya came in this summer. So it's been really great to also connect them to different artists from the community as well as some of my colleagues from UT who are theater professors. Dr. Roxanne Schroeder-Arce has also come and done work with us. And it's very communal, and it's very familial, and it's all about centering the girls' stories and their voices. So everything that we do, it changes from year to year because we design it to support the girls and what matters to them. And I'm going to share a little bit about some of the texts that we bring in the text into conversation with each other, and then some of the writing that some of the girls have composed, and some of the art that they've created around their identities and who they are and who they are becoming. And so some of the mentor texts that we bring together, that I brought together in the past around language, culture, and identity, like similar to what my colleague Alfredo was mentioning, we always bring in, I always have Pat Mora, my own true name. I love that poetry book for all the reasons that Alfredo mentioned. And we also bring in, work by Edie Danda from California, This Bridge Called My Back, and Michelle Cero's poetry and her stories and storytelling, and thinking about language, culture, and identity. And we read these texts, we discuss them, we do quick writes around them, and we always enter with art and then into writing. And the girls are encouraged to write in whatever genre it speaks to them. We lift lines, we have a lot of dialogue with each other. So what we've been talking about, there's that solitary time where they're writing, for maybe 5-6 minutes, and then we're doing some talking, and then they're going back into their piece and they're writing. And also the mentors in the space and myself, we're also writing alongside the girls, and we're also sharing our experiences with the girls as well. So I wanted to bring this literature to the conversation as how we layer the text and how these texts speak to each other in different ways. And on the next slide, I also have some more examples of the specific poems, Mi Problema, which speaks to my heart, and how, she doesn't feel like she's enough because, she doesn't speak Spanish. She can't roll her R's, but, one day she's going to, be a true Mexican. And so we talk about, our language stories alongside the work of Gloria Anzaldúa and the other texts that I brought into the space. And we also read work from Levi Romero, which is on the next slide, and thinking about who we are, where we come from. What does that mean? Because that, who are you? Where are you from? That can carry different connotations based on how it's asked to us and based on who's asking it as well. And so, we think about, like, what does this mean? Where am I from? And, we read the poem, we speak to it in our identities, and, what does this mean? And it's more than just a location. And then after reading all these texts and doing a lot of discussion and a lot of, start and stop with writing to kind of also build our stamina in as writers, we then, create art and writing. And on the next pages, I have some examples. So here is Monet's work, and on that image there is the drawing that she drew when we asked, where are you from? And she drew this image, and that's her. And, she's from the whole entire world, from all the living creatures. And we drew the image, we read the poems, and then we came back to the image to revise a little bit more. And then we took that to writing, and she writes, I am from the world where the salty, crashing waves hit the grainy sand. I am from a world of hate and cruelty, where war surrounds innocent people. I am also from a world of peace and love, where people are free and alive. I am from everywhere, from the cool starry nights to the hot sunny days, from darkness and from light, from the beginning to the end. I am from the world. Mm. So she brings in these tensions of the world. This is not a perfect world. She's from the good and the bad, the peaceful and the joyful. She's from all of these things. And she is figuring out her place in this universe. And so this is an example of her, the many conversations that we've had, starting with the drawing and the art into, reflection, and then taking it to writing. And then on the next slide, I have some more examples from Monet. I wanted to kind of show from one of my writers. And this is her self-portrait. We study the work of Frida Kahlo. We talk about how she used her art and how her art defined herself in different times of her life. Her long hair, her short hair, the different clothing, her expressions, the animals, all of that, the background colors, all of that symbolizes emotions and stories waiting to be told. And so we looked at her art. We did some gallery walks in the space. I had her art. We had her art up in the room. We watched a few videos about, her life. And we also talked about intersectionality as, in her art, but also in to bring that word to the conversation. And, we talked about our intersectional identities. And the girls created self-portraits using watercolor. And this is Monet's. And then she wrote about, and it's not right here, but they wrote artist statements that talk about the different symbolism of the piece. Mm-hmm. And then this piece right here speaks to some of the other themes that we wrote about as well. And everything that we read and everything that we discussed, she took right to poetry right away. And here's an example of bringing in a Michelle Serros, bringing in Pat Mora, and bringing in Gloria Anzaldúa and what she wrote. She wrote, "My languages. You can say your terrible words and try to strip me of my culture, my family, my language, my accent. But no one will know you will not win because I am a wild Mustang that cannot be tamed. My languages are a part of me. It is who I am. Those are my languages. You cannot tame this wild Mustang, my language." And this was in response to bringing these three texts together and all of our conversations throughout the weeks as we were all making sense of our language stories and our language histories, and understanding that there's a history behind, how we come to language as well. And for many of us, we're also trying to end a legacy of shame and ridicule that has been, part of our schooling experiences, or that of our parents or those that came before them. And I wanted to bring this into the space to show the ways in which we are inspired by other writers, and the ways in which we use writing to think about our identities, our languages, and our cultures. And the way that art also is a part of the space as a storytelling tool, and as a way for to break silence, like I mentioned earlier. For some girls, for some of us mentors in the space, we've never written about these things, and we've never been asked to think about these things in these ways. And what we find through this reciprocal sharing, we're not just there watching the girls have this experience. We are alongside them, sharing our stories with them. We see like similar experiences, and we see that things haven't changed very much. And so we kind of come together on those things and think about how we can support one another, and also realize that we're not alone in our experiences. And that's kind of a big, I don't ever talk about these things, but I didn't know that you, as 42-year-old Dr. Flores, has experienced this, or you, the girl right next to me, has also experienced this. And so we have conversations about, community and sisterhood, and what does this all mean? And so I wanted to share some of their work. I wasn't able to get videos, and I really think it's important to bring the girls' voices and the young people's voices into the conversation.
Wow, Tracey, I am just so in awe of this work that you've done. It's really, really beautiful. I love this idea of moving from art to reflection to writing. That's so impressive. And clearly, these girls that you're working with, these young women, have really been inspired to produce such incredible work, such thoughtful and meaningful work. So that's so powerful. I wanted to address, you said, ending a legacy of shame and ridicule, and also of silencing, which you mentioned earlier. Did you want to speak more to that, and how the work that you're doing is changing that?
And thank you for asking that question. We talk a lot about your culture and identity, and language is always part of that, and how it's so connected to who we are and how we walk in the world, but also how people view us, and the assumptions that people make about us based on what we look at and what they're assuming about us. And there's a history of, English only policies and mandates and restrictive literacy practices in classrooms that have, taken language away from us in really harmful ways. And so within this space, we strive to facilitate it. And the examples I didn't give, there wasn't any Spanish or other languages, but we strive to facilitate the space in English and Spanish. And some of the text that is not in Spanish, we try to get it translated. One of the mentors translates it. And so not all the girls have access to, bilingual education classrooms or dual language spaces. And so we strive to open space for that. And the examples I showed didn't show that, but there are many girls who, for the first time, are writing in Spanish or trying to write in Spanish, including myself in that space, because I really am working towards, healing my mother's Nina and myself for the future, for my daughter and those who are going to come after. And so it's a way to dismantle some of what has been experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful. I remember I had a high school teacher in my public school in New York, Mrs. Rodriguez, and when she gave me permission to write in Spanish, because I was writing poetry at that time, like 15, 16 years old, she said, "You can write in Spanish too." I said, "Really? I can write poesía in Spanish?" "Yes, you can." And it was just very, very important to me and to my development to know that it wasn't just a language to speak at home. I could also write poetry, and she introduced me to texts in Spanish as well at that time. So that's so powerful. I also wanted to emphasize the way you mentioned intersectionality and the way you're teaching writing and thinking and reflection, but you're also teaching concepts. You're teaching these very, very important concepts that will help these young writers make sense of their world and also make sense of our society and our culture and so on. So I wonder if you want to speak a little bit more to that, because that I thought was also really fascinating.
Yes, we talk about different concepts, and we look at some things historically, specifically around language. We bring in different texts, and there was a piece in NPR that was from a community in South Texas where they had a funeral for Spanish when these children were young, and they put Mr. Spanish in a box and they buried him. And the young children are now grown adults, and just they talk about what that meant for them, and it didn't feel right. But the teacher, the school said, like, this is what we're doing, and so they went back years later to unearth a language. Like, how harmful is that? And so I'm sorry. So it just broke my mind, and it really just hurts. And so we brought that into the space to talk about and process that, and also to recognize, like, our experiences, there's this history, this legacy, and to help us understand where we're at and how we can disrupt this for ourselves and for those that come after us. And so that was, I think I went off on a tangent, but we bring in different histories to historicize their experiences, but also they teach us so much. We talk a lot about gender in the space as well. They teach us so much. They teach me so much, and we're in that space with them as learners. And that's part of the beauty, and something I also tell my pre-service teachers: we got to enter our classrooms and our work with families as learners. That's the work of Louise Moll. Like, you enter as a learner of your students' lives.
Absolutely. That's the most beautiful part of being an educator, is everything that you learn from your students. It's so powerful. So we're almost ready for Q&A. Alfredo, did you want to comment in any way before we move on to that next part?
Yeah, I only want to say that when it comes to like figurative language, I tell my students I could care less if you can define what a metaphor is. What I would love is for you to recognize the metaphor in what you read and to create the metaphor in what you write. And I have to say that last piece that you had up, Tracey, I don't know if there's a stronger metaphor anywhere that I've read than "you cannot tame this wild Mustang, my language." Boom. I mean, who cares if that student can define what a metaphor is? That metaphor is power in language. That is wonderful. And I loved all of your student work. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. This has been so incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much. So we have some time for Q&A, and I see a lot of good questions here. in the comment section. So this one, have you dealt with students who are not interested in writing? What have you done? And a similar one from San Juana Rodriguez, what would you say to students that don't see themselves as writers? So these two are related questions. What do you do in these situations?
Alfredo, do you want to start us off?
Well, the use of language is innate. So what I tell my students, and I'm glad that question came up. I was looking at it myself before you even put it up. So I'm glad it came up because we do not reach 100% of our students. We never do. But 100% of our students are writers. They just don't know or they don't like it. What I usually tell those students is, have you ever gotten in trouble, like when you were a little kid and you had a magic marker or a Crayola, or you had a pencil or a pen or a carving knife or something, and you got in trouble because you went to your parents' furniture and you wrote something on that furniture? You know, you were a little kid, you didn't know anything about writing, but there was something in you that just made you want to put your mark somewhere, you know? So you scribbled or you wrote or you carved something, and that demonstrates that even before you ever came into my classroom, you already were a writer. Now, how you want to develop that writing ability is up to you. And some of them are like, no, thank you, you know, but most of them really do write stuff. The best comment, the best student example that I have, which was 20 years ago at least, is a student who said, I did not get in trouble, but I wrote all over the hall wall. I like drew all over the hall wall. And my mom came up to it and she didn't get mad at me. She added to it, you know, and then and it became a mural in the family hallway. So instead of getting in trouble for writing, it was reinforced. And she was a fantastic writer.
Wow. That's fantastic. Fantastic answer. Tracey, do you want to jump in?
I really love how you mentioned about making your mark in the world and about, you know, did you ever write your name on a piece of furniture or the wall? My daughter does that sometimes. And I did that before. I would try to do it all small, but you're making your mark. You have something that you're trying to say. You want to be seen and you want to be heard. I think that's taking it back to, you know, our youngest times. I think that's powerful. I, like Alfredo said, they're all writers, but some of them struggle to step into that identity. And it's, I make sure that we're writing every day and every single day. And if those are the students I need to meet with more, I do that, and finding different texts to bring into their lives that might inspire them, and also bring in texts about writers and how they came into writing. I think some of my students have found such inspiration in learning about other writers' experiences. I like to bring in the work of Jimmy Santiago Vaca. I've also shared Pat Mora's letter to Gabriela, young writer. I love that piece as well. But I try to find texts about how writers came into writing and voice and storytelling. And I keep pushing and I keep planting in their minds and their hearts that they're writers. And, you know, some still will leave the year, I feel a little bit better, but, and others will be like, I hated writing before. And now, I like it. I see the place it has in my life. And when I was at ASU getting my doctorate, like 200 teachers from Mexico came, and I got to teach a writing workshop with them. And we wrote every single day, about our families and our identities and many of them at the end were like, I did not like writing, and now I do. And we built such a community. And so feel like it's also us not giving up either.
Mm.
To lovingly push our students. And it might not happen when they're with us. It might happen the next year or the year after. And to remember that too.
That sounds really important. Yeah, that sounds really important to think about, like the long stretch, right? Like you might the seed, the semilla that you talked about at the beginning. Maybe you've planted the semilla, and the next teacher or the next experience will lead to the actual fruit. So yeah, that's beautiful. Let me go on to another question. So Alessandra Narvaez Varela says, hello and hola. How do you support students who want to include their Spanish in their creative writing when, despite our progress, Latin bilingual authors are still underrepresented in publishing?
That's a really great question.
It's a great question. Who'd like to go first with this one?
And I hadn't thought about it in the publishing sense. I like you mentioned earlier, Ruth, like giving students permission, because I feel, and I've learned from my experience teaching in the elementary and then also at the university, is that students have never been invited to draw on all of their languages. And so I bring in different texts that model that for my students and invite them into that. I hadn't even thought about that publishing aspect, about like how underrepresented it is. I really work for my students to know they have permission to draw on all of their languages in their writing, and thinking about audience and intentionality. And we talk about that in the picture books. Like we always read My Poppy Has a Motorcycle, and we talk about the use of language there. And not only in her writing, but in his illustrations. And the colors and all of that is part of the story. And so as far as the publishing side, I haven't really thought about that. I think about creating that space for students to draw on their full repertoires, to draw on all of their languages, because they come from different backgrounds of schooling where maybe it was, they were not going to have access to that kind of schooling. And so that's something that I hadn't even thought about. And I appreciate that question, but permission, and it sounds like saying it out loud, that permission, but making that space.
Absolutely. Totally agree. What about you, Alfredo, on this question?
If my students want to include Spanish in their writing, whether it's creative or analytical, it doesn't matter. My philosophy is dale gas. You wanna write in Spanish, write in Spanish. You wanna write in Native American, write Native American. If you wanna write in Indian, write in Indian. Whatever language is the world, right? I mean, like where I come from, we don't say wash, we say arroyo. We don't say what a beautiful mountain. We say que linda está la sierra, or we talk about the árboles, and we code switch, right? Code switching is what happens in our minds. So if code switching is what's happening in our minds, then why shouldn't code switching be happening in our writing? Because as Shirley Bryce Heath once told me, she said when students code switch, they not only switch to a word, but they switch to a bundle of information. So when you bring in that Spanish word or that Native American word, whatever it is, you're not bringing in a word, you're bringing in a whole bundle of information.
Yeah, that's so true. And a whole culture, I think
Correct.
about that too, very much with Spanish. Certain words just like open me up to a memory, a culture. It's so powerful. And I think you're both really getting students or other young writers to think about this. So to close up, there's some beautiful comments here. San Juana Rodriguez says, Alfredo, I hope your students know how lucky they are to have a teacher like you that affirms their identity and allows them to write about their lives. Lisa Gallego says, wish the world had more teachers like both of you, to make a more creative space for these children. I think that wanted to share that with you. Here, Stella Villalba saying, as always, Dr. Flores, Doctora Flores doing such an impactful work with our brilliant young minds. So what do you want to say as a closing remark to inspire other educators to follow this path that you have both opened so wonderfully for people in the field of education? Tracey?
Yes. So I was thinking about starting small, if this is not part of your practice, or if you're, I know many times we're given our schedule and here's when you're teaching this and here's when you're teaching that. And so whatever time you have in your day for writing, make it meaningful, build in routines, make it sacred. And make it real. And when I say make it real, if we go in there and we make it real, and this is, this routine and this ritual, and this is sacred time, they're gonna feel that. But if we go in there and we're like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that, they're gonna feel that too. So really embody that. And I do that because it is real for me. This is sacred. This is our time to be in community through our writing. And so, start small, find a community to support you, and also know that you're doing good things and build on those good things that you're doing, because our students deserve it. And so do you too, to be happy alongside your students as writers.
Thank you. I love that message. You've been talking about joy in writing and remembering, and now joy in teaching and sharing. And I think that's so, so very important. Thank you for that, Tracey. How about you, Alfredo?
Well, I feel like students and ourselves, we in writing, it's important to have that good ear. So I'm going to make a reference to a piece that Tracey mentioned, a letter to Gabriela by Pat Mora. In that letter, she tells Gabriela, listen, and I'm paraphrasing, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tracey, but she says, listen to your tia's wrinkles, or listen to your abuelita's wrinkles. Well, you cannot listen to wrinkles. So the message is, listen for everything. Listen for wisdom, listen for age, listen for, have an ear for everything. So that would be my advice. My advice is, as a writer, whether student writer or adult writer, listen to your tia's wrinkles.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to remember that. I love it. So thank you both so much, Tracey Flores, Alfredo Celedón Luján. You've both been amazing. And I also want to thank everybody for attending the Redefining the Writing workshop this evening with the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth, and it's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
And an honor to be with you as well, with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adios. Adios.
Adios. Adios.